It's always good to be with youngsters, and that way we remain young. So nice to see you all. Sabhabhya Sabhapatibhyascha Vo Namaha. So friends, while they set up, they already set it up. Good. So you have a slide mover, you know? No, it's okay. Then I'll take the help of Dr. Divya. I would want to start with a story. You know, I didn't prepare for this story, but you know, this story is very important so that we know where we come from and how advanced was our ancestors' thinking. If you understand this, then you will put that effort to understand what our Samhitas were trying to convey to us. You all know that Alexander the Great, but for me he's not great, but okay, let's assume that he was great. He came to the borders of Gandhara Rajya those days with an intention to win India, fight India, Bharat, and then become the emperor of the world. And he came with his entire 37,000 army, and he was then stopped by one soldier. He stumbled upon this particular soldier. It was a random pick. It was not, a well-planned move or something. He just stumbled upon this soldier. The soldier asked him, "Sir, what do you want here?" There was an interpreter, of course. The language was different in those days. So Alexander said, "See, I want to become the emperor of the world, and I already won almost all of the countries. I just have to win this country called Bharat, which I heard that has several kingdoms within, but you all are so well knit." I said, then the soldiers told him, "Sir, you don't have to wage a war for this. We have a very simple, just like our Dr. Reddy Garu was saying, treatment should be simple. He said, we have a simple method of a debate. You win me over with on a dharmic aspect and demonstrate to me that your dharma is better than our dharma." Dharma doesn't just mean some religion also, but it's a primordial principle. If your aspects of dharma or understanding of dharma is better than ours, you don't have to wage a war, sir. I'll give you my word that our Bharat will be annexed to your kingdom. It was called as the Yavana Raja or the Garaka, as mentioned in the Rig Veda. So this Alexander was already shot very deeply in the heart. He said, a soldier, a simple soldier, had the guts to talk on behalf of a country to an emperor, to a future emperor with the entire army behind him. One single soldier was just discussing this. Then he said, "See, would you want to talk to your king about, what the proposal you made?" "Sir, I don't need to talk about a king, sir. Ours is a very structured dharma. The knowledge is pretty standardized. We all know what is dharma, what is adharma, and the word that I gave will be followed by my king as well. If I lose, then the kingdom is yours." That was really a big shot for Alexander. Then you look very tired, would you want to rest here for some time, or would you want to go and explore the country you wanted to invade and understand our dharma, because it will be very improper for me or inappropriate for me to actually defeat me in the dharma that we believe is dharma and have a debate. So why don't you just go explore? So you don't even have to talk to your, Alexander was asking, don't you have to talk and take a permission from your king? So I don't need, we have a visa upon arrival and then you can walk it. So he said, if you're afraid, you can take your soldiers, 100, 500,000, doesn't matter. But you can go with your soldiers, or our country is pretty safe, sir, for any stranger. So don't worry about it. So, but still, Alexander insisted that he would go with about 128 or some number. 100 plus soldiers accompanied Alexander. They walked in. They stumbled upon a certain village, and in that village, an old lady comes out of her house, and she suddenly sees Alexander coming in. And he looked very tired because he waged several wars. He was very tired. And this lady says, okay, she immediately opens her door. It was not locked, just opened her door. And then she invites these guys. And then she says, so just wait for 20 minutes. I'll prepare something for you so that you all look very tired. And I want to feed you. Alexander says, oh, oh my dear lady, she was a little above middle age. She addressed, oh lady, why, you don't know me and you want to feed me. She said, see, in our country, Atidhi Devo Bhava is already, inscribed in our site. So you came without any notice to me, so you're Atidhi and you're a god for me, so I'll feed you. You don't you have to know who I am? She said, no, I don't have to know. I know that you're tired. I look at your face, you're tired, I have to feed you. That's my dharma. Alexander was shot again. Then Alexander has some food and she says, see, today we have a panchayati. See, I need to go to the panchayati Raj, we have a dispute going on. Then he said, oh, that's very good. With such attitude, these people also do have disputes. So they went to the panchayati Raj. The panchayati Raj was sitting. It was a typical, atypical possibly, land dispute as we have today. But unlike we have today, the land dispute was not about whose land it belongs to, but it was a slightly different dispute. So Alexander was being narrated as to what is happening. So the land buyer had a dispute with the seller. The dispute was, he paid in full, he got the property registered, but when he was plowing the land, he stumbled upon huge treasure. Now this huge treasure, the seller, the buyer said, no, this does not belong to me, because when I bought this land, I did not pay for the treasure, so this treasure belongs to the seller. Then Alexander says, is that a dispute? We have been, taking away treasure from any country that we invaded. Then she says, are you thieves? Looking at you, you look like a king, but I feel that, your attitude is of a king, or not of a king, but of a thief. He was really insulted, but he couldn't say anything because she was an old lady, slightly above middle-aged lady. Then he was really intrigued. What is this buyer, seller going to say? Because he was offering money, treasure back. The seller said, see, it doesn't belong to me. When I sold the land, whatever inside was there should belong to the buyer. But the buyer says, no, it's not mine. So the dispute is whether a certain treasure belongs to whom. Both are disowning. Here, that was the kind of dharma existent in our country, friends. Now they both approached the Panchayati Raj. This dispute did not end for 6 months, so they went to the Panchayati Raj. The king there said, see, they said, okay, whatever is unclaimed should actually belong to the state. So they went to the state's president or the king and offered this to the king. The king says, see, this is a small panchayati and the donations, not the taxation, friends, remember. The donations that you people have been making made us already over, we have abundant treasure, abundant resources in the treasury. We don't need this actually, and whatever we don't need, we don't have to take it. So this, I cannot accept it because it is against my dharma again, to accept anything and everything over a certain limit. Alexander was like literally crying, what kind of a country is this where people trying to disown treasure? Not and everyone was very rich, not that they were poor, they were poor people as well. But then the dharma of each of the citizens and also of the king was so well followed by everyone. And the prime minister, of course, the minister who was assisting the king stepped in. He said, sir, I have an idea. What is the idea? See, the seller has a daughter, the buyer has a son, and they both are in love. Why don't we marry them and give a gift to them during their marriage? So the problem is solved. See, friends, this is a nation. So Alexander asked her, Madam, what is going on now? What is the decision? She explains the decision. And then she mentions it. Alexander was very, very impatient. Why do they refuse treasure when treasure is given? The lady explains, see, we follow Patanjali Yoga Sutras. The Ashtanga Yoga Marga, Yama Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi are the 8 folds paths of the Ashtanga Yoga Marga. The first one being Yama. Yama is, it has 5 principles. What to do, what not to do were mentioned in Yama and Niyama. In the Yama, there are 5 principles again. Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Aparigraha, Brahmacharya. This particular, she explained that Aparigraha is the concept that we all follow. Whatever doesn't belong to us will not belong to us. We don't take it. That is the principle that we follow. And Alexander then, he was completely killed even before the war started, friends. This is, and he lamented, he repented. Why did he even decide to invade a country where dharma is followed to such extent that every individual was really a big warrior, a big spiritual soldier. So that is our heritage, friends. And the moment we know this story, or when I heard this story in my school, it really gave me such pride in our ancestors. Not only pride, I said, okay, this comes with a huge responsibility. When you are given a multi-million-dollar check, it doesn't just come like that, friends. It comes with a responsibility. So I felt the responsibility is to share and contribute to whatever we have inherited through our ancestors, either in the form of spiritual sciences. Our ancestors really worked very hard, friends. They had the darshana of God, and they translated that into the language of certain scriptures which are called as the Shat Darshanas, just now Dr. Murali Krishna Garu was mentioning. And what the scientists like you and me did, they translated this language of darshanas into a scientific method which is repeatable, which has a anubhava pramana, then shabda pramana, then anumana pramana, and also aptavakya. All these pramanas were followed, and this language of darshanas was translated into samhitas. So that's how you end up with, they translate, if you translate the language of darshanas into medicine, then you end up with medical science in the form of Charaka Samhita, then the surgical science in the form of Sushruta Samhita, and when you apply this into astronomy, astrology, you end up with Varahamira Samhita, then Jaimini Maharshi, Varahamira, Bhaskaracharya in the recent past. Several scientists, drashtas contributed to this science. And Bharadwaja Samhita, Bharadwaja Maharshi was the one who started off with at the beginning of the Manvantara, and he then passed on this Bharadwaja Samhita to Maharshi Vedavyasa at the end of the Dwapara Yuga. If you just go with the timelines, it appears to me that he lived for more than 3.5 million years, friends. How is it possible? Maharshi himself has mentioned in his Rasayana Shastra that he again is a part of the Bharadwaja Maharshi's compendium. He explains various regenerative processes, how he lived, how he survived a kidney failure, how he stumbled upon a certain tantra called as the Arbuda Tantra, Aupadhenava Tantra. You know what, friends? These tantras, when I read in Moscow, I was astonished. The heart-lung machine was so beautifully explained in the Aupadhenava Tantra. My surgery friends would would understand what I am trying to say here. So this is our legacy, friends, and I tried to do whatever I could in my limited capacity of understanding and also resources. Whatever I could, I tried to translate into the language of modern science, because that was the only science that I understood. And of course, I took the liberty of doing this, not because I wanted it, but because Maharshi Sushruta prompted in his Sutrasthana, Sushruta Samhita, Sutrasthana, chapter 4, 8th shloka, he clearly mentioned Eka Shastra Madhyanana Vidvat Shastram Nishchayam Tasmat Bahushrutam Shastram Vijaniya Chikitsakaha, he says. A Chikitsakaha has to be empowered with several sciences, he says. And he also envisioned that in future, some of these sciences would be camouflaged and re-imported to Bharat. And he said, my descendants of the great Bharata Vamsha, please accept those sciences also and translate your knowledge into their language so that you again, bring in relevance. So I took liberty of doing whatever work I did as a commandment that came from Sushruta Maharshi, friends. Tasmat Bahushrutam Shastram. So you need to, in whatever capacity that I understood, that our duty is to understand this great science of Ayurveda from multiple aspects, and that's exactly what I tried to do, friends. So initially when I started off, I felt it's such a primitive subject, why did I start actually trying to understand Ayurveda was, we really were stumbled upon certain problems in the modern medicine, friends. To be very frank and straight, my peer would be here, not only peer, he's a big senior and he has done a lot of surgeries and a lot of work, contributions to the society and also to the science. We both understand and accept that the modern science, we are only treating only 15% of diseases. Next slide. Okay, we'll go there. So 15% of diseases are being treated. 45% of the diseases are actually converted from acute stage to chronic stage, and we are managing for the rest of the life. And about 40% of diseases, we don't even know where they come from. They are called as etiology unknown. So we don't even know why those diseases even occur. Like most of the autoimmune disorders, like cancers, for example, we don't know the etiology. 40% of diseases are diseases where we don't know why they are even originating. And not only this, so if you talk about specifics, like the WHO is actually saying, what is health? Health is a state of physical, mental, emotional and social well-being, and not just mere absence of a disease. That's what the WHO says. And now when you translate this into whatever we know now, we are trying to, when you go to a doctor, he draws you, of course he goes up with a questionnaire, he understands your signs and symptoms, and then to validate his hypothesis or validate the provisional diagnosis, he orders certain tests, isn't it? Those tests, for example, if you talk about, say, today's world, diabetes, for example, we all know that India is the diabetes capital of the world today, with about more than 15 crore, 150 million diabetic patients. So if you look at the standards evolved, over time, diabetes is according to American Endocrinologists Association, you all know, or some of you must be knowing, that diabetes is a condition in which glucose levels go beyond a certain normal. So what is that normal? Beyond a certain limit, if the sugar levels go, blood glucose levels specifically go, then there are several complications that you end up with. So American Endocrinologists Association is saying that your average HbA1c should be below 5.5, which is equivalent to approximately average should be around 120, is what the American Endocrinologists Association is saying. Now American Diabetic Association is saying, no, it could be below 6.5, so don't worry until 6.5 is saying. So it should be around below 160 is what they are saying now. Now the American Gerontology Association is saying, no, we found several problems maintaining blood glucose levels too low. So we are setting it around 7.5. The American College of Physicians, there's a certain trial that was done, ACCORD, A-C-C-O-R-D trial. According to that trial, American College of Physicians have come up with their own data. See, none of these organizations are unscientific. They're all scientific, they're all data driven, they all have several hundreds of thousands of patients data analyzed. They're giving these numbers not randomly, no, they all have data. So their own data, the American endocrinologist data, is contradicting the American diabetologist data, and again American College of Physicians is saying it should be between 7 and 8 in a certain category of patients, and it should never be below 6.5. See the contrast. American Diabetic Association is saying it should be below 6.5, but the American College of Physicians is saying in a certain contingent of patients it should never go below 6.5. Try to maintain it between 7 and 8. And according to a certain trial that was done, ACCORD, ACCORD trial, it should be around 8.4. Now the American Veterans Affairs Association is saying, no, our veterans had suffered if they maintained their blood glucose levels below 7.5. So we have reset it at 9.5. Now friends, what is diabetes is a big question today, really speaking, because we have seen, not only in our clinic, but the data also suggests that people who maintained levels of less than 6.5, 32% of patients, especially in the age categories between 40 and 60, suffered 33% of cardiovascular mortality, not morbidity. Mortality is, they ended up with, literally fatal complications of diabetes when they maintain their blood glucose levels below 6.5. So the American College of Physicians has thrown up this big debate now, and you know what, luckily in 2019, because I used to practice this from 2000 onwards, so I had several problems explaining to the patients. Luckily these guys came up with certain guidelines, because whatever comes from America is is brutally accepted, unfortunately. So, or fortunately. And the American College of Physicians in 2019, what they are saying is, you should personalize the blood glucose levels in your patients. How do you personalize? One of the guidelines that American College of Physicians was actually giving us is to personalize the diabetic goals, the blood glucose goals. How do you personalize? No one knows, friends. So this is a big question, isn't it? Are we really the diabetic capital of the world, or are we being, applying an improper standard and hence possibly causing problems in our patients? We don't know yet. We have to do a study. No one has done that study. Now, this is a world's, at least 30% of the world population is right now suffering from this. Now come to cholesterol, friends. This is a very big problem now. I'll tell you, we did a lot of studies on that. Cholesterol. Now we all know, we all were in 1982, Merck started this concept of good cholesterol, bad cholesterol and all. They did some HPLC tests. HPLC is high powered liquid chromatography test, based on which they isolated fractions of cholesterol, and then fractions that had high density were called as high density lipoproteins, and low density lipoproteins, and very low density lipoproteins. Then there was something called triglycerides, and they said, say, HDL is good cholesterol and you should have, it should be above 60. Now the standard is that you should maintain it above 60, alright? Milligrams per deciliter, of course. I'm omitting the units just so that we understand the magnitude of the problem. So it is saying HDL should be high, and low density lipoprotein, which is called as the bad cholesterol, should be below 100. And triglycerides should be below 160. The original standard was the triglycerides should be 1996. The original standard was that your triglycerides should be below 270. But then over time it came down because of certain observations. Again data driven. So they're not random numbers, friends. So this is what people get confused. They think that the pharma industry pushed it. No, the pharma industry comes up with data, and it is up to us to interpret the data. So that interpretation was gone. They all have data. See, triglycerides setting this level at 160 was based on an observation made from more than 7 lakh patients. 7 lakh patients. Now, recently the data again contradicts this. The Danish Research Institute, Gilbert Aberholm et al., these are the names of the scientists, they published that they randomly picked up patients from Caucasia, from India, northern part of India, then Pakistan, the Caucasian area, the Iranis, Iraqis, and they found that in about 7,800 patients that they investigated, 90% of them, 90, not just 1 or 2 or 60 or 70, 90% of these patients had more than 60 milligrams per deciliter of HDL. And now he says, no, I did my investigations, these people suffered heart attack. They all suffered heart attack, by the way, because of high levels of HDL. The good cholesterol was high, and hence they suffered heart attack, is what this research institute is saying. And he did some plaque studies, he isolated the plaques, did biopsies, and then did HPLCs, and then he found out that there was excessive accumulation of HDL that led to the plaque formation and leading to heart attack. Point number 3. Point number 4, Malinsky et al., a Russian scientist, they are all crazy people, Russians are, But they stand for truth, friends. That's what I can vouch, because I lived there for more than 16 years. I know them. Malinsky then et al. He's a cardiologist, and he then moved to Germany. He investigated about 122,000 patients from several countries. It was not just Caucasian specific study like the one that the Danish Research Institute published, but then they mentioned that this guy investigated about 1.2 lakh patients who suffered from heart attack. And you know what he found? 75% of them had triglycerides and LDL, the bad cholesterols, below 100, which is actually being prescribed now. So now the friends, is the bad cholesterol really bad, or the good cholesterol is really good? We don't know. Really, we don't know. We are in a big problem. And now what we demand, this is another study, interesting study. Everyone should read these studies, friends, because that's the only way you'll understand where we are right now. If you don't understand where we are right now, I mean the allopathic physicians are right now, you can never convince them, because we are all completely science driven, and we know the current problems of modern science, and we have to address, Ayurvedic people should address this particular problem at wherever we have stumbled upon, and then only will we be able to listen to you. I mean, I'm talking about Ayurvedic physicians, words being taken seriously by the allopathic physicians or scientists only when you are solving a certain problem that the population or the world is actually right now exposed to. So the Hunt study again demonstrates that statins, Merck came up with this word called statins, the HMG CoA reductase inhibitors. I mean, okay, for those youngsters who have not started reading biochemistry yet, it will be slightly difficult, but what it does is, Merck invented a certain molecule which reduces the bad cholesterol in the body. Alright, and what the Hunt study, Norwegian research group found out was, it was published in 2015, they found out was, in a certain category of patients, more than 90% of people who followed the norms of statin drug prescriptions religiously, more than 90% of them have suffered either a new form of heart failure. See, statins are given to strengthen your heart. We are saying that your heart will be free of disease because of statins. So what they found was, they found a new form of heart failure or a liver failure or a kidney failure in these patients, and people ended up with early onset of Alzheimer's. I mean, it's called as Alzheimer's in India, but it's Alzheimer's, or senile dementia, which otherwise would have been found only in people over 70 years of age. And these are people that suffered senile dementia in a younger age group, between 40 and 60 years of group. So these are the problem in several other problems are there, friends. So why do we have to look at an alternative medicine is because the current medicine has a certain problem, friends. Not only at the level of understanding the disease, not only that the stem cells, for example, you all know when Human Genome Project was actually envisaged in 1992, because our own scientist Dr. Hargobind Khurana, that he invented this. He synthesized insulin for the first time. He moved to US in 1977, and today insulin is a blockbuster drug, right? So that was actually synthesized by Hargobind Khurana in India. Alright, now the scientists of the West, they said, okay, if we are able to unravel genomics, because insulin is a protein, for all reasons it's a protein, and proteins are synthesized under the command that is coming from the genomics. When the gene expresses itself, it results in protein synthesis. So if you unravel the entire genome, you will unravel the entire protein structure of all the proteins present in the body, and if you know how how their structure is, you can synthesize them and then cure diseases, was the hypothesis in 1992. So accordingly, in 1997, several scientists, 7 million scientists and their assisting staff and other staff, they participated in that project called as Human Genome Project. And they unraveled by 2003, April 23rd, I suppose, they unraveled the entire Human Genome Project. And you know what? They found out that only 22,000 out of the 3 million, they identified that the genome has about 3 million subparts, which they call as the codons. But out of which only, genome has 3 million genes, out of which only 22,000 were codons. Codon is, people must be knowing, who passed the 12th grade, they would know. The codon is a information that is encrypted inside the gene that later gives rise to a command through which the protein is synthesized in the body. Okay, codon. They found only 22,000 codons, and the body has 9 million proteins. Paradox, isn't it? Because if one codon is commanding the body to produce one protein, one codon, one protein was what Kirk and Watson model mentioned. If that was true, we should have only 22,000 proteins. The rest of which means one is we know only 1% of the genome. The rest of the 2.9898 or 978 million genes, we don't know what they are doing at the time when the Human Genome Project was unraveled. So we know only 1% of the genome. Not only that, the codons, how are they actually synthesizing so many proteins was again not known. 9 lakh proteins at that time, at that time were unraveled, but later we came to know that most of the antibodies are again proteinaceous in their structure, and you have more than 2 million antibodies already identified. So where are these proteins coming from? How is the body synthesizing so many proteins is a fundamental question at the level of molecular biology, at the level of molecular biochemistry, molecular microbiology, friends. So these are the problems that the modern medicine is actually encountering right now. And of course the stem cell research started and literally ended. There are only 2 products right now because the Human Genome Project didn't give the results. They were not able to synthesize any more protein just the way we synthesized insulin earlier. None of the entire Human Genome Project was literally didn't give them any money because any ROI. So they ended up with working on stem cell research, and to get the whole story short, stem cell research also has a problem. After isolating all the stem cells, after understanding which stem cell gives rise to which tissue, we were not able to produce those particular organs experimentally. Only 2 products are right now working. They produce this cell, each primordial stem cell produces certain tissue only in experimental cell culture models and not in human models. So in human beings, during a clinical trial. So we only have 2 products that have actually one was used for CD45 lymphoma, which improved the quality of life only for 2 years. So your life extended by only 24 months. So friends, so stem cell research also has not yielded the kind of benefits we thought originally were should be yielding. So what do we do now? So friends, these are just some of the reasons that I compiled. There are several reasons again, friends, why we should actually look for an alternative, or how we can enrich the current understanding of the human physiology, human biology is something that we need to work on. So that's when, these are the questions about 30 years ago, even now they are questions still. So I started, I'll tell you what I started doing when I started reading pharmacology. I was really scared that each drug could produce 4 or 5 benefits and 40 to 50 pages of side effects, friends. They're really true. This is the fact actually. That was an immature fact, immature thinking at the time when I was reading pharmacology. But then I started reading the Ayurvedic scriptures because I was told in my school by Bhagavan that Yanna Bharate, Tanna Bharate is what he always used to say. He said, whatever cannot be found, whatever knowledge that cannot be found in Bharat cannot be found anywhere outside. So with that, I started, looking into our own darshanas, because I was given a brief introduction to our darshanas in my school, and before the 9th grade, we were asked to mug up at least 13 Upanishads, including the Aitri, Ishavasya it started off with. So Mundaka, Mandukya and the Kena, Katha Upanishads, we mugged them up, but I didn't know why we were mugging up at that time, but now I know. They're very, very essential, because that really helped me understand not just life but also certain fundamentals that later help me understand Ayurveda. So I'll just put them as I understood. So friends, we saw what health was as defined by WHO, and when you go to a doctor, we saw the confusions that a doctor really has. Whether a certain person's blood glucose levels should be below 160 or below 180 or below 250, we don't know. Is good cholesterol really good or really bad cholesterol really bad? We don't know. But we certainly know from our own scriptures, Ati Sarvatra Varjaye, isn't it? But what is Ati? How do you quantify Ati is something again a big problem for us. But then with this brief background, I went into started reading these scriptures. Luckily I had some strength of connection to Sanskritam early in the age in my school itself. But then later I figured out, I always was told that Hanuman understood all that Lord Rama even gestured. Why? Because he knew the Nava Vyakarana. In Sanskritam, even your gestures communicate things, and there's a certain Shakalam is the Sanskrit grammar that actually helps you understand the gestures of a person. So now that is being formulated into a different science. But then Hanuman understood everything that Lord Rama said and everything that he didn't say. So that's why he was the one who was successful in accomplishing Lord Rama's mission. So I started reading the scriptures. When I started reading in translated versions by several Premvrata Sharma ji and all this, I felt this is not giving a holistic understanding. I felt these translations were very primitive because from what I understood at that time, there are Nava Vyakaranas, friends. Why did Hanuman understand Lord Rama is because why was he successful? Because he understood Sanskritam, and he is also called as the Nava Vyakarana Veda. See, Indram, Aindram, Sandram, Shakalam, Shakadanam, Kasakrishnam, Kaumarakam, Paniniyam, Saraswatam. Completely 9 grammars are there, friends. Today we are reading only the Paniniyam. So Saraswatam is completely missing, Aindram is missing, Indram is missing, Shakalam, Kashakrutsam, because Kashakrutsam is another important science that what I figured out during the course of my understanding Ayurveda, because Kashakrutsam gives you a scientific perspective. For example, Rasavadam is based on a certain Sanskrit grammar called as the Kashakrutsam. Rasavadam is a science of chemistry, already documented by the Maharshi Kanada. So several grammarians use, okay, if we are talking in English, friends, right? We are talking in English. How do you understand English? Because there are certain rules of how we speak in English. All right. And these are pretty documented. The Renan Martin documents all these, grammar principles. And we know that there are only 1100, 900, it was 900 about a century ago, now they became 1100. So they are learning still. 1100 grammar principles, if you know them, you'll be able to talk in English. For us to communicate in Telugu, we need to know 1600 grammar principles, as it is called the Chando Vyakaranam. For us to communicate in Hindi, it should be 1700 grammar principles. Sanskritam has more than 200,000 grammar principles, friends, and they are classified into 9 different libraries by our ancient grammarian scientists. So they are called as the Indram, Aindram, Sandram, Shakalam, Shakadanam, Kasakrishnam, Kaumarakam, Paniniyam and Saraswatam. Paniniya itself has about 3,996 grammar principles. Saraswatam has 90,000 grammar principles. Aindram has 25,000 shlokas actually. Each shloka is one principle there. So in all 200,000 grammar principles, and each syllable has a certain meaning. So if you apply one sutram from each of these 9 grammars to understand the syllable, you end up with 1 matra gives you 9 meanings. If a word has 2 matras, you will end up with 9 to the power of 2 meanings, friends. So that is where a bit of gap in communication has actually happened. When we translate the scriptures into English, if you don't understand the original Sanskritam, then we are at a loss. So I started looking for these books, taking a cue from Navavyakarana Pandita Hanuman, and then I found 4 grammars at least, Kashakrutsam, Saraswatam, Paniniyam and Aindram. They can, and Tamil language, has extensively borrowed the principles from the Aindram grammar, friends. Even Tolkappiyar himself has mentioned in his own preface that I have borrowed, Aindram is a very elaborate language, but I am borrowing only 1300 grammar principles is what Tolkappiyar is mentioning. So the point is that this language has to be properly understood and then translated. So but after understanding this, I slowly started applying this knowledge in trying to understand what is mentioned in our scriptures. So the definition of health as was explained in allopathy by the WHO, and look at the definition of health as given in our own scriptures. It says, Maharshi Sushruta, and everyone agreed with the same definition. I will take one definition because several definitions are already given, because it will okay, by the way, this is a part of my 545 hours of lecture for allopathic and Ayurvedic doctors. I am trying to give a glimpse of what I discovered in my own way, which can be completely structured actually, which is completely structured. So let me take the example of this particular definition. Samadoshaha, sama agnishtha samadhatu malakriya, prasannatma manasendriyana, swastya iti abhidiyati is what our Maharshi mentioned. So what he says is, if you look at just the first word, samadoshaha, what the ancient scientists were saying was that these three, the doshas should be in a certain samatva. Now what is samatva is again a big debate that we possibly would love to get engaged maybe a little later date, but I came up with some mathematical model to understand samatva. I started off with understanding that these doshas, these three doshas, as mentioned. Next slide. So what is happening? Okay, let's go. Let's first understand what is samadosha. Let's understand this shloka or construct in whatever form it is right now. So what the rishis are saying, if these three doshas, the vata, pitta and kapha, are in certain proportion, equal proportion in all of the 7 tissues and 42 organs, and also when the dhatus, samadosha, sama agnishtha, all the agnis in the body, there are 13 different types of agnis, dhatava agnis 7, and then you have the pitta agnis 5, okay. So if these agnis and also the samadosha, samadnis, samadhatu, the dhatu poshana, or the dhatu should be in a certain proportion. And again, not just the proportions were given, but also they quantified in the form of Anjali and Angulika. Friends, you should know that this is not a primitive science. That's what I slowly started knowing, that these doshas should be in a equal proportion in all the 7 tissues and 42 organs. That when it is maintained, the dhatu performs its functions appropriately. And what it leads to is, it leads to prasanna atma, prasanna manas and prasanna indriyas. So what is prasanna atma? Prasanna atma is sukha dukhe samay kurta labha labho jaya jaya. In adversities you are balanced. You are not indifferent. You are completely involved, but you are balanced. That is what prasanna atma gives. Prasanna manas, again, what is prasanna manas? The manas that is devoid of the kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya is a prasanna manas. Not only this, what it gives is shama, dhamma, upariti, titiksha, shraddha, samadhana. You have completely quantified. Today if you ask an American what is emotional health, he doesn't know. And they say, we have right to actually shoot anyone because the gun culture is accepted because we won the independence through guns, and so everyone has a gun there. They don't know how to use the guns. If you look at the American psychiatry, without any satires on the American civilization as per se, look at the American psychiatric data. 72% of the Americans are either on 1 or 2 anti-anxiety drugs. And there is only one culture, friends. There is the American culture, right? There are only whites and blacks there. Number one. Number two, American Psychiatric Association itself gives that 18% of Americans right now, it was 16% 4 years ago. In 4 years, 18% of Americans, adults, are on 1 or 2 antipsychotic drugs, friends. Not just anti-anxiety, antipsychotic drugs. And we are trying to ask the Americans whether Indians are emotionally healthy or mentally healthy or not. Indians shouldn't even be asking, why? Because we have 10,000 cultures here. We have officially 1700 languages here. 10,000 different dialects and 3.5 crore devatas. We don't fight like them. We don't fight like them. We're mentally completely balanced. We shouldn't even be asking Americans to define mental health and seek recommendations from them as to what is mental health or emotional health. Emotional health, you see the number of just 1/4 of Indian size Americans are, and there are 17 times more court cases in families in America. I'm not saying, we are not against any culture, friends. I'm not telling this, I'm bringing this data not to be antagonizing you or anyone, but look at the data at their state of mental and emotional status, and look at what we are asking whom. We are asking them to define standards of health in India. So this is a gross mistake, friends. So our rishis have clearly mentioned that what is what is mental health, right? A mind that is free of kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya, and full of shama, dama, upariti, titiksha, shraddha, samadhana. So what should not be there, what should be there is clearly defined. Emotionally, again, so as I mentioned there, sukha dukkha samikrutva, labha labho, jaya jaya, and drudakaya, and how are you physically health is again, when you have enough dhatus, and based on the measurements given applied by Angulika and Anjana, you see the dhatu proportions in an individual, and there are certain sutras, what weight by weight, what should be the proportions of mass of each of the dhatus is again given. Mamsa dhatu chatvara pramana, mamsa, meda, asti dhatu chatvara tri dvi pramanena. So what it says is weight by weight, the muscle mass is to the fat mass, is to the bone mass should be in a 4:3:2 proportions. And the size of the heart, everything is given, friends. So beautifully explained in Ayurveda. That's what I stumbled upon. And of course, I'll skip this because the definition of yoga, what is sama will be very, very intriguing, and it will lead to good debate, but we have paucity of time. I'll skip this. But I have taken in my mathematical model that sama dosha should be in 1:1:1 proportion based on the text, based on the shlokas mentioned by Madhavacharya, later became Sri Swami Vidyaranya, and he documented something called the Vedanta Panchadashi after he became a Drashta. In the Vedanta Panchadashi, chapter 1, 17 to 19 shlokas, in the Vedanta Panchadashi, chapter 2, 24 to 39 shlokas, he clearly mentions how do you interpret the dosha proportion, what is a healthy dosha proportion is clearly mentioned, apart from of course Sankhya Darshanam, Ishvara Krishna Sankhya Darshanam, chapter 6, first shloka clearly mentions what is a dosha, when do you end up with a dosha, why are the Panchamahabhutas, for example, are we in the Sandhya Vandanam, we say, Sandhyanama, Savitriyanama, Gayatriyanama, Saraswatanam, we end up Prithvi, Apaha, Tejo, Vaira, Akasha. We are bowing down to the Panchamahabhutas as celestial gods themselves. And we are saying again that the combination of the Panchabhutas is giving rise to dosha. And why is dosha called a dosha? Again is given by Sankhya Darshanam. He says, whenever the Karya Karana Vyavastha originates, that's when the dosha starts. If there is no Karya Karana Vyavastha for any act, this is again a big topic, so friends, I will skip this topic because we are going to go deep into Sankhya Darshanam and how advanced was the thinking of Sankhya Darshanam today to explain quantum physics. We come up with certain fields, isn't it? There is a unified quantum field is what scientists are hypothesizing that has given rise to quantum physics. Just for the youngsters, I would want to say the Sankhya Darshanam gives you 17 different levels of quantum fields which are unmanifested. Unmanifested 17 levels of quantum fields, and they are all documented in our Sankhya Darshanam, friends. So from those Kapilacharya's Sankhya Darshanam, Viveka Chudamani, Vedanta Panchadashi, I derived this the concept of samatva and why the dosha should be in 1:1:1 proportion in each of the dhatus so that they are healthy. So cut the whole story short, if when these three doshas are in equal proportion in each of the 7 tissues and 42 organs at every level of biological interaction, even a genomic, protein, subcellular pathways, cellular, tissue, organism level pathways, what you end up with is that you end up with physical, mental, spiritual, emotional and social well-being as well. Spiritual well-being is being added up into the health definition by WHO after possibly Modi ji interfered. No, I mean they're slowly trying to get this, but they don't have a quantifiable method of spiritual health. So they're still trying to figure out, and this is beautiful, isn't it? What is physical health, mental health, emotional health is clearly defined. Based on what parameters would you say a person is physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, socially healthy? Number one. And as opposed to allopathy, I mean, we don't know what is emotional health. We don't know what is, we talk about certain serotonin and other chemical messengers, but we really don't know what quantities of these messengers should be in each individual so that a certain individual is happy. But then, I stumbled upon an interesting problem when I started looking into what is Vata, Pitta and Kapha, because the balance of these doshas is the one that leads to health, isn't it? So what are these, how do I understand these doshas is the next question that I had. So when I looked into the Ayurvedic basics in the Sutra Sthanam, I stumbled upon several questions, because Vata is definitely characterized by Shita, Ruksha, Daru, Khara, Laghu and other properties. Pitta by its own properties, Snigdha, Ushna and other properties. And again Kapha has 7 properties, friends. But the problem was, how do I explain or how do I understand this in the light of allopathic, Harper's biochemistry, for example. Harper's biochemistry has mentioned more than 7 million chemicals that are present in the body. And then I started reading the chemistry books on Rasabadam, Rasendra Sarasangra, several Rasa books. More than I stumbled upon the fact that the more than 2.7 million shlokas just on Rasa, just on chemistry and biochemistry, friends. I mean, we missed this entire thing in our curriculum possibly. So interestingly, the view of biochemists was like this, those days biochemists. They were saying, Ashitishchitra Laksha Rasamrutam Swastya Itibidhiyate. What our rishis were saying was that there are 8.4 million chemicals in the body. Next slide. Yeah, I'll come. 8.4 million chemicals in the body, and they're not just said chemicals, they said Rasa Amrutam, nectarine chemicals. So that's the beauty of our science, isn't it? Just like when Alexander came to India, they saw a divinity, divinity in Atithi. Similarly, even the chemicals were seen as live chemicals and divine. They attributed the word divine, nectarine chemicals. Rasa Amrutam is what is maintaining your health, is what is mentioned in our Ayurvedic scriptures, friends. Not only this, in today's Harper's biochemistry, we know that the body has 7 million chemicals. Interestingly, and only 900,000 chemicals are actually characterized. We don't know the characteristics of the rest of the 6.1 million chemicals already present in our body. They were isolated, identified, but we don't know the characteristics completely. But this ancient science of Ayurveda is beautifully mentioning that there are 8.4 million chemicals in the body, and Jalaja Navalakshani. There are 9 lakh chemicals that are water soluble. So why, and there is Thavara, Vimshati Lakshani, 20 lakh chemicals are non-reactive. Gurudha Chaturasya Lakshani, 4 lakh chemicals are what? Fat soluble. Friends, see this, they have given an entire profile of all the 8.4 million chemicals that are present in the body. Okay, why do we need the solubility profile? The solubility profile, if you are trying to investigate a new molecule, what you need to do, so for example, you want to investigate tea, right? We have tea every day, isn't it? You put tea in water and then boil it, you end up with a certain brownish color decoction, right? The tea decoction. So what you do is, it is a water soluble, whatever chemical that was water soluble got dissolved in water when you boiled it. So now what you do is, you apply certain principles of analytical chemistry and separation techniques. You isolate that chemical which gave this brownish structure, brownish tinge to water, and then put some light on it in the form of X-ray diffraction or NMR spectroscopy. So what you do is you're slowly characterizing the chemical and trying to understand. So this, if you don't know the solubility, you cannot isolate the active component. So the solubility is the first step in analytical chemistry, and we know only the solubility of 9 lakh chemicals in the body right now according to the allopathic modern science, but the Ayurvedic science has already mentioned that there are 8.4 million chemicals, and the solubility profile of all the 8.4 million chemicals is given in several hundreds and several tens of thousands of shlokas, friends. This slide was just to accentuate your attention on this, the extent of biochemistry already mentioned in our scriptures. So to cut the whole story short, 8.4 million chemicals have been characterized in, there are more than, see again another interesting definition, I cannot stop here. See, there is something called Rasayana Charya, chemical reaction, and Rasayana Karsha, chemical interaction, clearly defined again in Rasavadam. What our rishis are saying, the chemical, for example, NaOH, sodium hydroxide plus HCl will give rise to NaCl plus H2O. We know this reaction, isn't it? So now, this is just a chemical reaction. Now what is happening is, this is Rasayana Charya, and Rasayana Karsha is the intramolecular or intra-atomic interactions, chemical interactions were characterized as Rasayana Karsha, like the van der Waals force of attraction, the sp in carbon compounds especially we stumble upon sp, sp1, sp2, sp3, sp4 hybridizations. So there are Rasayana Karshas, how many of them? 32 trillion Rasayana Karshas mentioned in this, and our rishis were possibly, I have a data scientist in front of me, without application of data science they could not have characterized them into 21 broad categories. They classified these Rasayana Karshas into 21 broad categories and further grouped them 27 categories into one group, guiding all the molecular pathways, 7 of them into guiding the metabolic, and the rest of the 7 guiding the assimilative pathways. And friends, in biochemistry these are the major pathways: molecular, assimilative and metabolic pathways, and they call them as Vata, Pitta and Kapha. That's how beautifully this entire body, the biochemistry of the body was beautifully classified into Vata, Pitta and Kapha, and our rishis are saying Vata is to Pitta is to Kapha should be in 1:1:1 proportion. That's how beautifully I deciphered that the Ayurvedic biochemistry is actually dealt with. So not just this, everything around us, whatever thoughts you make, whatever moves you make, everything, the foods that you take, the foods that you find, the foods that you grow, everything has a certain Vata, Pitta, Kapha fingerprint, friends, that is dealt with in Dravya Guna. That is not that's not known to you people. That's not unknown to you people. You're specialists in that. And what a Ayurvedic physician has supposed to be doing, from what I deciphered, is that you need to, and I was talking to our professor, she immediately said, no, doctor, you're a Vata Pitta. I said, and I'm a Pitta Vata guy, but whatever it is. But this standardization should happen. This disparity should not be there is my proposal, and I'll make the proposal towards him. Give me another half an hour so that oh, it's just 4:40 now. Okay, we have time. Alright. Okay, so now what I've been using regularly in my clinic is applying what your target is. An Ayurvedic physician's target is to identify the imbalance of these doshas in each of the 7 tissues and 42 organs, and accordingly see if a certain dhatu is in deficiency or in excess. If it is in deficiency, you do dhatu poshana, or brahmana and langana therapies are accordingly mentioned. So diagnosis of these or quantifying these doshas in individual organs is very, very important, friends. So for which we have beautiful techniques like several shlokas. Again, I stumbled upon more than 800 shlokas are mentioning only the pulse wave characteristics, friends. Pulse wave characteristics. So when you apply, how do you do the Nadi Pariksha? Why do you do the Nadi Pariksha? And how do you understand that? It's beautifully explained. It's a part of the signal processing, because of which I again read signal processing techniques and all. I'll go next. I don't have to. And what you do is, once you understand the VPK fingerprint, that's what I love to call it as, the Vata Pitta Kapha fingerprint involves the quantification of Vata Pitta Kapha in each individual organ. Once you know that, you map foods that bring about a balance of these Vata Pitta Kapha in individual organs, map not only foods, but also your physical exercises. Either it could be in the form of fitness regimen in gyms, or it could be in the form of yogasanas that are already documented, very well documented, in the form of breathing exercises, in your several pranayama. Okay, by the way, pranayama should not be confused with breathing techniques. Yogasana should not be confused as yoga, friends. They are done for a different purpose. Until unless we started our discussion with that, yama niyama should be followed to do pranayama and asanas and pranayamas. Then you end up with pratyahara. It is a different technique altogether. We will not go deep in there. Once you do this mapping of foods, mapping of moves, mapping of thoughts, so that you end up with VPK balance in each of the individual organs, the body automatically cures. That's what our rishis are saying, is what I deciphered from our sciences. So now, how do I deciphered but this is all theoretical, isn't it? I can say any number, I can come up with any number of theories of understanding, but how do I prove? How do I prove to the current scientific community? To the next question that I had after reading, I spent more than 10 years just for reading the scriptures. In 2001, I started conceptualizing the experiments that have to be done. So the first one, what we did was, because at that time I approached certain CSIR institutions, but this is exactly what they said. अरे हम खुद आयुर्वेद में interested नहीं है, तुम क्यों करना चाहते हो? Was the one that I heard 21 years ago, friend. But then I said, okay, maybe I'm privileged to continue the legacy of a rishi. So I went ahead, then I went back to Moscow to start these experiments, friend. So what I did for the first time was, with whatever understanding or improper understanding or exactly proper understanding that I had at that particular point of time, I classified certain foods based on, again, the Nidhana and Chikitsa Sthana and the Dravyaguna. I started interpreting the Dravyaguna, and I classified foods into Vata aggravating, Pitta and Kapha aggravating foods. And the idea was to create a model of Vata, Pitta and Kapha in experimental animals. So, because if you don't understand what they are doing in different pathways, first we need to prove that. Because Vata, Pitta, Kapha, friends, for all practical purposes, they are adravyas. Just like our Jagdish Chandra Bose, you know what he hypothesized? The existence of a certain quantum particle which is called as boson particle. When he did that, 1918, sorry. And it took 100 years for us to come up with a technique to unravel boson particles. Today they are, of course, the Americans, the Europeans have a habit of adding their names, of course. They can never accept it as boson particles. They added Higgs also. So they have now become Higgs boson particles. Whatever it is, we're not worried about it as long as they're right. So they came up with the Higgs boson particles, and they proved that yes, Jagdish Chandra Bose was right. And he was ridiculed at the time. Now why? Because these particles, interestingly, stayed in the hadron collider only for 10 to the power of minus 15 seconds. And that was defined as a Truti by our ancient scientists. They said these Paramanu particles, according to Rasavadam, again Varahamira Samhita also gives some certain insights into how long these Paramanu particles live. He mentioned clearly that they live only for 10 to the power of minus 15 seconds. That exactly, the Truti is the unit of dimension of time at that time, and Truti becomes how Truti, let's not go deep into that, but why did I say these particles lived only for 10 to the power minus 15 seconds and they suddenly vanished? So they were able to document this, they were able to envision these particles, and they gave this name. So why am I saying this is, our rishis have clearly mentioned already that these Vata, Pitta, Kapha fields, if they are, if they have to be called as fields, they are adravyas, they are non-particulate, but they exert certain influence on the particulate matter and guide these biological, physiological, electrochemical, immunological processes. So because they are adravyas, you cannot just quantify them. So what I did was, what we did earlier was 21 years ago, we fed experimental animals in the form of viscous strain rats with vata aggravating, pitta aggravating and kapha aggravating diets, again applying the Kedara Kulya Nyayam and also Kale Kapota Nyayam. We fed these experimental rats for over 1 month, and at the end of 1 month we isolated hearts. There is a certain method called as Langendorf method. We applied that method, isolated the hearts and measured action potentials. Okay, I'll tell you what is an action potential. So when I'm talking, you guys are listening to it, right? How do we listen to a person? The external sound gets translated in the ear into an electrochemical message. It is an electric current pretty much, and an electric current is generated at the site of the receptor, either in the ear or when someone touches you. The tactile receptors convert the external touch into an electrical message. Same thing happens at every level. The smell, the taste, everything has a certain electrical message. It is converted into electric current, and that is called as a certain pattern in which these electric currents generated in the body, and that is what is called as an action potential. Next slide. Yeah. Next. Then mundu slide.